we are going to, for all the four presenters, we are actually going to open up the floor now, both in person and virtual, for some questions. And first off, I'll just ask, I believe there's some questions already in the in-person. Amy, do you want to? I'm sorry, virtual, I'm sorry.
Yes, we have a question that says, for systems going into wastewater plants or districts during larger upgrades, do the technology providers work in parallel to the main engineer, or do they operate as subs?
So that's a technology. I mean, we have a couple of technology providers there. Was that question being asked sort of the presenter?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Anyone who has a relevant answer may speak up.
Yeah, I can take that one.
Yeah,
we do have people asking about our system all the time. And when you're doing updates to the system, that's a great opportunity to connect to the system. So as an example, we're updating a pump station in one of the municipalities. And so the local municipality said, oh, well, while you're doing that update, can we look at sewer heat recovery at the pump station? And so that's an opportunity where we'd work collaboratively. The city would provide a technology provider, and we'd look at how it can be integrated into the Metrovan system.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Does anyone else have a different response?
I can just jump in a little bit with our feasibility assessments. We'll sometimes see the MEP work directly with someone like Shark or Huber on the technology that's specific to that. So, you know, or URIG. Then they'll bring them in as kind of, I don't know what the agreement looks like, but we'll see them sort of part of the conversation through those assessments.
Great, thank you.
I guess I can provide the experience that we've had with our singular pilot project, in that there was a representative from Shark, and that's the system that was used for the Alexandria real estate construction, but there was like a representative that was included, but they're operated mostly as a sub on that project. Now, I think similar to what Colin mentioned, we've had users, when they're looking into our system at the beginning, say, hey, it would be great if there is a upcoming improvement in the near future, if we could kind of piggyback on that effort, because one of the most expensive parts of doing these projects is the excavation. I mean, you could be anywhere from 20 feet below grade to 100 feet. So, yeah. I hope that answers your question appropriately too.
Thank you, Drew, and thank you all for piping in on that. Any questions here from the audience in person here? Actually, I had a question. It sort of relates just more generally. I just wanted to get feedback from the panelists and presenters. Based on your experience, what have been some of the barriers as far as getting these projects started? I mean, there are assessment resources that the technology providers, you have expertise in-house. Specifically, I was focused on design costs. Has that been an issue, or wanted to get the panel's thoughts on design? Is that actually an issue with your experience in these projects getting off the ground?
For us, I wouldn't say it's design costs quite as much as the civil construction costs. It's very site specific. There's certainly sites that cost more or cost less, but we've found that the civil work involved in building a sewer tap is often very difficult and usually very expensive. And the challenge for a building when they're assessing it, it's not always impossible to have a good payback on that. In fact, you often can, but it's a big first cost, and it serves as a major barrier. The other big barrier we've seen is timing. So even when a developer is interested and wants to do it and reaches out to us and we respond right away and say, oh yeah, and even when the SOAR looks good, very frequently they will be on a timeline where they just don't feel they have time to fully analyze and get comfortable with the technology. Even if we say it's going to, they don't take our word for it, basically. DC Water will say, oh yeah, it's going to be fine. We're doing it. You can come see it. And they'll come see it and they'll see it and they'll kind of agree, but they won't get everybody in their organization on board, or their lender will be concerned, or for whatever one reason or another, and their building just has to keep marching along, or they won't be able to have apartments and start charging rent. And so that's also been a pretty big barrier. And it's just a killer because you have to line up the pieces. And if you don't get them all lined up at the point where they've got to start, whatever their drop deadline is to start building or finalize the plans or whatever, you're just finished. No matter how good the site is, how valuable the project is, it's just never valuable enough for them to delay their building over. So we've had that as a pretty significant barrier in addition to questions of cost.
Great, thank you, Saul. Did you have a follow-up? Or? Drew, go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of touch upon a lot of what Saul mentioned as well. So it is feasibility, I guess, an experience that we've seen. Feasibility of, like I said, excavation. Like I said, you can do an open trench cut for, if it's 20 feet below grade, but if you're getting much deeper than that, the difficulty of the project, of course, goes up as well. And then cost associated with that, of course. And then I was trying to write down some things that we've seen as well. And timing is a huge one, right? That's why we have this template contract ready to go so that we can try to meet those timelines. But even with this, I guess, preemptive measure, we still run into, hey, their timeline is running much quicker than like our internal resources could review a potential project. Or maybe in particular right now, one of the barriers we've seen is that we don't have enough data on our system to see how a singular project impacts the overall heat potential of our conveyance line. So we've installed some meters upstream and downstream of our current installation to see those trends and patterns, but we've had to deny some projects because they were downstream of our project, and we just couldn't guarantee that it wasn't going to be detrimental to that first installation.
Great. Thank you, Drew. What about the Vancouver, BC folks? Any thoughts or additional information on that question? Okay.
I can add to that as well.
Okay.
So,
Come on up,
the
man.
mic or?
I think it will pick you up if we get a little closer.
A little closer. So,
Vancouver had a comment.
oh,
I'm sorry?
Vancouver may have a comment.
Okay. Go ahead, Winston.
Yeah, I think just I think timing, like some of the other panelists mentioned, and capital costs up front. And so a lot of our municipalities working up here, they're applying for Canadian federal grants and subsidies, which have certain restrictions and timelines and requirements. And so we're noticing that is kind of impacting schedules and moving forward. For us here at Metro, we're not trying to be a barrier. We're actually offering our sewage and our energy for free right now. So we're trying to help the business case and make this as business as usual for proponents interested in it. But I think the costs are the upfront costs are hard versus comparing to like fossil fuels and stuff. It's still relatively cheap to burn natural gas. So I mean, there's a lot of like policy levers in place where there's different codes requirements now up here in BC. In terms of new buildings and whatnot, and I think that might help move things along in terms of looking at renewable resources such as waste heat. Thanks.
Thank you, Winston. And Ed, go ahead.
So I think upfront costs can be daunting, but through a power purchase agreement, you can offset those costs and de-risk that capital cost. In our experience, it's more around the timing. So getting in the building, there's extra permits work that needs to be done. So if there are timelines, new construction specifically, that can be a challenge. A retrofit where there's no timelines, just maybe some decarbonization goals, that's much easier. But by taking on a power purchase agreement, that opens up other questions. People are not comfortable with that yet. right? And not everyone wants to enter to a 10, 15, 20 year, right? So public institutions, hospitals, they're going to be around for a long time, but it's also just getting comfortable with not just wastewater as a energy source, the whole concept of different models and alternative financing right now. And once you get past that barrier, I think this thing will really open up a lot of possibilities.
I think just on the, just building up on the evolution from when the power purchase agreements came out for solar and using that same model, it seems like that has sort of lasted the test of time, and it has been another option for folks to basically share in some of the savings and yet
Absolutely,
eliminate those upfront costs. So thank you for that. Okay, Amy, you have another question, virtually?
If that one's done, yeah.
I think we should have pretty good coverage on that. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a question for Saul. Have you had any upstream installations yet? And if so, have they impacted your design heat transfer?
No, we do not have any installations upstream. I guess if you want to get very, very particular about it, I think actually the AGU system no, it's not. No, it's not. It's on the other pump station. Yeah, so we do not have any connections upstream of one another. There was a question earlier that I answered in the chat box here, but we would very much like to collect data on the temperature anomaly created by a wastewater thermal connection as the sewage comes through that system back out into the sewer and downstream. We have everything in place to be able to do that, although we'll see the AGU system is a little bit on the small side versus the flow in the sewer, so the dilution effect will be pretty big, but it's probably big enough to be able to see the change, at least nearby. We just have not got the resources together to put the thermometers in, collect the data, analyze it. It's less a matter of money and more a matter of time and energy. And we very much would like to do it, and hopefully we will be able to do it maybe even this coming year. But right now we don't have any real data on that question. We don't monitor sewer temperature as a matter of course. So we don't naturally collect this kind of data. We have to go out and specifically seek it and collect it and do, look at it.
Thank you, Saul. Any other questions here from the group? Okay, yes, ma'am. You might have to I can bring the mic over. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Margie Johnson with MWRA, and just kind of following up on one of the earlier questions, if a municipality or an authority is doing an upgrade to a facility and you wanted to implement this technology, would the technology providers work with the consultant who's doing the detailed design, or work separately, or both models? How does that?
Yeah,
Right,
we
and
can
that's-
bring the
that-
tech consultant sort of back. I mean, you're saying with the ones that presented this morning.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. What are the different
Yeah.
models that are used?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some information in our matrix, Margie, that sort of talks about, owner operated type thing, depending on, utility or a third party. But we'll go around the room and have the tech providers that are here, specifically for Massachusetts interested customers. Frank, you might have to step over here if you don't mind. That one's actually pretty good. But you don't need
Okay. Yeah, so my experience has been to work directly with the consultants that are doing the design on the system, because there's multiple ways to implement solutions, especially when you start talking about redundancy, right? So working hand in hand with the consultants, it gives us the opportunity to deliver our theory and application and how the system's going to operate into their design effort. Because right now, a lot of times the consultants are thinking about traditional mechanisms, right, of system design. And we're sort of assisting them to think outside the box and look at some other alternatives from the design perspective, especially from the mechanical systems perspective.
Any other from the other tech providers that we done? Thank you, Frank. that was their rig and,
Yeah, absolutely, we need to work with them, right? So, and it's a bit of a luxury because they get to design the building that meets our system, and we get to design the system that they need and that they want to the point of redundancy, adding extra things. So we work very closely. I can tell you, Noventa does not want to do the HVAC mechanical for entire building. They just want to provide heating and cooling, right? So we work very, very closely. Sometimes with a sub, sometimes we work directly with the owner. You know, we're contracted out by the owner. But again, we're very flexible. You need to have that relationship. And it's much more like dynamic than just putting in an old fashioned boiler or chiller, right? Because it's a lot more options and scalability.
Thank you. And Aaron, you want?
Yeah. And the short answer is yes, we actively work with anybody and everybody who wants to explore wastewater energy transfer. In fact, Brian Williams here from HTS New England is our manufacturer's rep for all of New England. And we have a very simple, some people call it rudimentary, project intake form. Tell us about your project, give us as much information as you can about your load profile and the source, and you can scrub, you don't have to give us proprietary names, just here's a generic project we're going to look at. And Rob Trimble, who's also online right now, Director of Technical Sales, the brains behind our company really, along with the founder and inventor of the technology, we will take that form and very quickly turn around an analysis and say, hey, listen, we think we've got an opportunity here. Here's a preliminary equipment selection. Here's the preliminary equipment you think you're going to need, wastewater holding tanks, what have you. So happy to do it. Connect with Brian here or myself or Brock, anybody. We do it all day, every day. It's great. So please, thank you. And it's a didactic relationship because in addition to helping you figure out, we start understanding about the building portfolio for the region as well. So it helps us understand the strategy as well. So we welcome the opportunity to do free work for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Amy, are there any other questions? I actually had a question with Travis. One of the slides that you was put up towards the end was that I guess I was so lost in that neighborhood, the projects that are under sort of your review. Are those sort of at different stages, or is there an opportunity to look at? I think you had mentioned, but those haven't been constructed. It's still sort of working through your internal and review process.
Yeah, so that was a kind of a broad picture of projects that are in pre-file all the way through construction.
Okay.
The bigger projects like Dorchester Bay City, which I'm sure people in this room have heard about, or on the dot, which are sort of longer phase projects. I think timing came up as one of the barriers, and the reason why that we're interested in those scale is so we can kind of sync the timing and phasing of those projects with like a utility master plan, and then how that can relate back to building system design. So if we're looking at like a phase 2, which could be in like 5 to 6 years, it allows the opportunity for, to lock in the financing, to do the due diligence that we do from the developer perspective. But yeah, that's just kind of a general overview. And just thinking about like what's there in terms of gallons per minute with that amount of square feet, and how we can kind of start thinking about that as an untapped resource, I think is another aspect.
So it's definitely an opportunity that it might fit in as far as the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of like pie in the sky interest. Right?
Yeah.
It's like if from a planning perspective, if I'm looking for districts or areas of opportunity, I'll kind of look where things are starting to consolidate or cluster. And we've seen a lot of development occurring in our Dorchester Ave. We have planned Dorchester Ave that's already enacted, and so a lot of these projects are looking at these principles.
Yeah, great, thank you. I have one other question actually for the panelists, and we'll sort of put a perspective on for folks here in Massachusetts. But as far as Saul and others, Saul first, as far as the state regulatory permitting process or even EPA, were they involved in this as far as review? Was there coordination? Can you give us a sense of sort of on those two projects that you did, what their role or involvement was in those projects? And if that's not a good question to ask, I was going to kick it to, we talked about some folks here in Massachusetts that we could maybe provide some insight on. Again, this is the initial stages here in Massachusetts. This is the first step, but I was just curious if you could share maybe any roles that maybe the state environmental office or at the federal level.
Yeah, was that directed at me? I'm sorry. I thought I heard you say Saul, but I wasn't sure.
Yes, it was directed. Moving my voice, I'm sorry.
No problem. Yeah. So the short answer is they had no involvement whatsoever. We reviewed this with our council. We reviewed the potential DC is a little unusual. Our state environmental agency, which is the District of Columbia Department of Energy and Environment, does not regulate DC water's source system. So they do not hold state primacy. They are not involved in regulating the collection system in DC. We are directly regulated by EPA. So EPA issues us the permit to operate the sanitary and combined source systems in DC. They were not involved, so neither was involved, neither state nor EPA. State was not involved because they have no role, basically, right? They're not a regulatory body overseeing the source system. EPA was also not involved because this did not trigger anything within that permit. So our lawyers reviewed what we planned to do. They wrote the covenant that governs what AGU is permitted to do in terms of the terms of that document. And the assessment was that given what they were restricted to under those terms, there was nothing for EPA to review at that point, right? So this didn't fundamentally change how we operate the source system. It didn't, change what the flow was or where it went. There was nothing, and I'm not an expert on these regulatory matters, so I'm sort of relaying what I know from our attorneys, but a full review could look at the specific regulations, I suppose. But basically, it didn't change anything in our permit. So because it didn't change anything in our permit, there was nothing to inform EPA about. And as long as we had appropriately put the bounds on the covenant such that nothing we did was going to trigger what's in the permit we have, then there was nothing for EPA to get involved in. So we didn't have any direct contact with the regulatory agencies, and I don't see that there's a reason why we would or would need to. We did work with DOEE on the legislative change to get wastewater thermal into the renewable portfolio standard for RECs, but that was quite a different. It was not a sewer regulatory matter. It was simply changing the RPS, and so we had suggested that the council may want to consider such legislation, and in so considering, we had notified DOEE that this was something they might want to support, and I don't think they took an official position in the end, but certainly they were, not opposed to the legislative change. The executive here was fine with it. So that's the short answer. I mean, other states might be different story. We have a very unusual regulatory oversight system here in DC. We often have very unusual everything, but certainly in this case we do. And I can't say what would or would not be necessary under other states where there's state laws that may apply, or the permit, compliance is different. Certainly, you'd have to look at your own circumstances in Boston or in Massachusetts, and how what you intend to do falls under your own sewer operating permit, state regulations, or how it might tie in there.
Yeah, actually, I want to mention, we have some folks here from our regional office, and I just wanted to, for the benefit of the folks here in the room, I thought it'd be helpful. Dave, do you mind coming up a little bit? While David's coming up to the area here, I just want to give folks a sense of, so MassDEP has regional offices that have handled the permitting, compliance and enforcement. So we have 4 regional offices. Boston is headquarters. We have Central Mass, Western, Northeast, and Southeast. And I talked to Dave, and I thought it would be helpful to just, Dave was a section chief in our Central Regional office, and now he's in our Boston office. And I thought it'd be helpful for all the folks here, what we have everyone, just to sort of talk about potentially what our role could be. And again, this is the initial stages, but I thought it's really, really important to sort of just hear from someone that knows a lot more about the details. And what are the services we offer at DEP for projects that are coming through with his interest. So Dave, do you want to say a few words? You can just actually go. I think they'll pick that up. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Hey, how about those New England Patriots? Huh? Right, coming back last night? Great. I think Super Bowl's in the works here. No, it's not. It's not. Let's be honest. So hi, my name's Dave Boyer. I work in the NIPTES program out of Boston. Been with, in the wastewater program for quite a while. So one of the questions that came up was, state permitting. You know, would a state permit be necessary associated with these type of projects? There is a permitting process for modifications of wastewater treatment plants, you know, whether or not any of these particular proposals would trip that. I guess it's a little bit undetermined at this time. A lot of the state permitting that has been in effect kind of was created many years ago, decades ago. So a lot of this stuff is basically happening as we speak. So we don't really have any sort of defined permitting process at this moment. But there are, of course, you know, regulations that apply to operation and maintenance of sewer systems, 314 CMR 12. That is the regulation for operation of treatment plants and sewer systems, public works. And that is a pretty, you know, encompassing regulation. One of the concerns on any sort of technology that's an in-pipe type of technology. And I think some of the case studies with Vancouver and DC and Seattle that were just discussed kind of alluded to that, is the concerns on O&M, you know, and making sure that these type of proposals don't, you know, potentially have an adverse impact on the operation of a sewer collection system. I mean, I think that goes without saying, but it needs to be said anyway. We just want to make sure that in any situation that, you know, sewage stays in the pipe and it doesn't cause any sort of operation and maintenance problem. And that's a, you know, area of concern. But, you know, by and large, if there is a proposal coming up and you're looking for maybe state input, it's always a good idea to reach out to DEP's regional offices. We have 4 of them, Springfield, Woburn, Lakeville, and Worcester. And reach out to those, the wastewater section chiefs, and maybe start up a pre-application meeting in which some of the issues can be discussed and brought to light and get into the details, and then just determine if any sort of state involvement is needed. You know, given the fact that sewer collection systems are typically owned by the municipality, obviously, you know, they're a key player in these type of projects. We want to make sure that they're, you know, part of the whole conversation, and it's their sewer system. And it's incumbent upon them to make sure, obviously, the sewer system runs effectively and efficiently without any problems. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, I guess, is how I would, you know, throw it out at this time. But, you know, we're always listening. We're always interested in listening to new projects that come down the line and how the state can assist in these matters. So thank you.
Thank you, Dave. I really appreciate it. I think it's really helpful to sort of, there is that option for folks to start the process early and meet with the regional folks. And as part of that, we'll have the contact information for those 4 section chiefs on the wastewater side. Excuse me. I think thank you, David. Thank you very much. You might have one more question.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. This might be a little tangential, but has anyone designed a heat transfer system that could also be used as a treatment device for influent rag removal?
Seems like a great question for Huber and Shark.
Drew, go ahead, Drew. You have the magical answer to this question?
I do not. I would actually support Colin that this would be best answered by Shark or Huber. I just know that there are some systems that include a macerator to take care of various materials that could end up in the conveyance system, but that is, to my knowledge, to protect the system itself. I would, like I said, support Colin. That's probably best answered by Shark or Huber.
So I think speaking on behalf of Huber, my colleague Nate is here. Huber is a wastewater company, and that's what they do. They screen things out. So the ROK4, the screen that we use for our thermal system, can do that, but they have a full range of products available for such things. So absolutely, it's very easily done.
Yeah. And what I would say for Shark is the Piranha system handles solids, passes right through. So if you flush it in the toilet, it goes down, and guys like Saul and others have to screen it out. The wastewater treatment plant are responsible for it. The Shark has a macerator as stage 1. So we chop up anything that comes into our system. So we're not, you can't scare us. Send it down the pipe, we'll take care of it.
Great. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Aaron. And thank you, Drew. Okay, with that, I'd like to, again, thank all the presenters and the panelists, you know, for taking the time out and sharing your experiences, your stories, and most importantly, sharing your persistence. You had a vision, and to see this actually come to reality is very rewarding. We really appreciate the information that you provided to our folks. It's been really beneficial. So thank you all very much. We really appreciate your time and your experiences.